is the Electile Dysfunction Podcast with Ashton Cohen.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Electile Dysfunction Podcast with Ashton Cohen. I'm Ashton Cohen. So the Biden administration recently announced new vaccine requirements, which demand that businesses with more than 100 employees mandate that their workers are vaccinated. If an employee decides not to vaccinate, then they will be forced to undergo a COVID test every single week. So basically about 100 million Americans are affected by this. Now, given that on most days, Biden seems borderline mentally incapacitated, and it appears that his few remaining cognitive functions are, disintegrating faster than the rights of gay men in Afghanistan, this decision is deranged even for him. Before we even consider the wisdom of this order, let's take a look at it from a legal perspective, because it would be shocking if this issue was not brought before the Supreme Court and ultimately deemed unconstitutional. First, we have to start off by stating that there are no enumerated powers under the Constitution, giving the president authority to mandate vaccines of private employees. The president's caretaker seemed to understand this. Just a couple months ago, Circle Back Queen Jen Psaki announced that vaccinations are, quote, not the role of the federal government, end quote. But Biden's puppet masters, on the other hand, they seemingly couldn't control their dictatorial impulses, so they decided that their best alternative was to impose this vaccine mandate by way of the rulemaking powers of an administrative agency. The agency they chose is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also known as OSHA. Now, one of the problems is that OSHA does not have broad authority to fight epidemics or to promote public health. Its mission is limited to protecting employees from workplace hazards. Another problem is that it takes years for administrative agencies, such as OSHA, to promulgate a new regulation. There's a whole rulemaking procedure you have to go through requiring advance notice and opportunity for the public to comment and hearings, etc. But all the president's men and women and non-binary, pansexual, androgynous, non-conforming, transgender, two-spirits, whatever, we try to be respectful and inclusive here on the show. Anyways, all the wannabe authoritarians who control the agenda for the Biden administration weren't going to let a little dumb thing like the Constitution or legal procedure get in their way of imposing their will on, you. So the workaround is to attempt to get this vaccine mandate implemented and enforced immediately, is to use a convenient little mechanism called an Emergency Temporary Standard, or ETS for short. Under an ETS, OSHA is permitted to dispense with the traditional rulemaking procedures. But here's a problem, and the reason why this mandate will likely fail. You need a special justification to promulgate a new rule or regulation via the ETS authority. OSHA must determine that its ETS is, quote, necessary to protect employees from, quote, grave danger. So that's not just a significant risk, but grave danger caused by, quote, new hazards or by exposure to substances or agents determined to be toxic or physically harmful, end quote. Furthermore, the rule being implemented by way of ETS must be necessary to limit that grave danger. So that essentially means that the government has to demonstrate there isn't really a reasonable alternative to protect against this grave danger, other than, in this case, to implement this vaccine mandate. So follow me along here for a second. So in this case, the Biden administration argument would be that the presence of unvaccinated employees is the source or is causing this so-called grave danger that the government is attempting to neutralize. But then you may ask, wait a second, what about the unvaccinated who have, natural immunity? There are millions of them. What about the recent and important clinical trial out of Israel demonstrating that those who were previously infected with COVID were more protected against the dominant Delta strain than those who took the vaccine? Are they the source of grave danger? Why should those with natural immunity be effectively forced to take something they don't need? Moreover, how are the vaccinated in grave danger from the unvaccinated? If the government position is that the vaccine is effective in protecting the vaccinated from the adverse health effects associated with COVID. Now, the Biden administration argument seems to be that the protected need protection from the unprotected by forcing the unprotected to acquire the protection that apparently isn't protecting the protected. You got that? That makes sense to you? No. No. It actually sounds as coherent as Biden himself whenever he goes off the teleprompter.
I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true international effort to pressure.
By the way, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
But here's the thing. This isn't supposed to make sense because the woke authoritarians aren't going to let a little thing like sense or logic interfere with their ability to control your life. Remember, these are the same people who will defend the right of celebrities to stroll around maskless at Obama's birthday bash in Martha's Vineyard, or the Met Gala or the Emmys, while mandating that the servants who cater to them, like all the children in public schools, cover their mouths and faces at all times to signal their obedience and reinforce their inferiority. And let me state for the record, because this is something you have to do these days, I'm not against any vaccine personally. I've taken all the standard conventional ones that everyone has to take. I've taken the one for COVID. Now, granted, when I took the one for COVID back in April, it was a 90% efficacy. That's what the information provided told us. Now it's down to 66%, which is quite a big of a difference. But nevertheless, I took it. And of course, I support the vaccine being available to everyone and anyone who wants to take it. Of course I do. What I won't stand for, though, is tyrannical behavior by way of senseless and arbitrary government mandates. I won't stand for a government official, a president, any president, let alone one who's senile and mentally deteriorating like the current one, forcing or coercing citizens to insert something in their body that, by the way, didn't exist in the marketplace a year ago. And, according to the science, is medically unnecessary for millions, including children and those who have natural antibodies. And so, here's the central point. If they could get away with this, if for some crazy reason this does not get before the Supreme Court or declared unconstitutional, then these wannabe authoritarians will be able to do anything they want to. Anything. What's stopping these same kinds of people from mandating something that's even more intrusive and justifying it as necessary in order to, let's say, fight climate change? We talked about this in the first podcast. You never hear the woke progressives anymore say it's a free country. Because that's not what they want. They don't want a free country. They want a subservient country. And if that's something you don't want to see happen, here's the red line. Make your voice heard. Hold these tyrants accountable. Don't let them cross it. If you enjoyed our show, please click subscribe to stay up to date with our YouTube channel and podcast, and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts so that we can keep delivering guys some great content. Thanks again, and we will be back next week. And probably 6 robots.
We stand for a free and open debate and exchange of ideas. And if you disagree with anything we talk about, you are a racist and no better than Hitler.
What?
Let's get started.